I'm going to ask James to come on over and give us a quick background and explanation, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Wayne. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, councillors. I think you can see from the amount of people who've actually turned up today that this is actually an issue that is very close to people's hearts, because it goes to the very issue of character and community here. Anybody who's bought in this area buys for a reason, and it's for the streetscape, it's for the walkable areas that we have, the fantastic parks, and the council has done an excellent job in assisting the area to improve tremendously, I have to say. So we have to acknowledge where council has done good work. We have an issue here now in Rosebery that's not necessarily of the council's making, but we do ask the council to do what they can to assist us in fighting people who are just absolutely ignoring the law. They know the issue is there. There are people here who don't even speak English, who've been here for 60 years, who know about this issue. So it is absolutely paramount that we continue to get council to assist us on this fight in terms of people getting two-storey houses approved where they know it's in breach of a covenant, and if somebody took it to the Land Environment Court, it would most likely be overturned. Now, I've got legal advice that says that, and I'm happy to talk about it, but what we ask council to do here is assist us and get these people to obey the law. Otherwise, we have chaos, and that simply cannot exist. It's going to actually cause community problems, already has, and people are so concerned about it in a pandemic, turn up in numbers. So I don't think I need to say anything.
Thanks, James. Put your hand up if you haven't given Vanessa your phone number. So Vanessa's going to come around, make sure you get your phone number down on that contact tracing sheet. Put your hand up if you're feeling sick. Excellent, no one's feeling sick. Yeah, what a great day. And what about that win from South Sydney? We're going to march on. Let's hope so. All right. Going to hand over to John, who's got some first-hand experience in regards to some of the things residents are struggling with when they don't know what's happening. And and this gives a bit more insight in regards to also what James is saying as well. And then we've got the people who have made many attempts to try and resolve it to no avail. So, John.
As James alluded to earlier, as a resident of Rosebery, and when you purchase your property, you're buying into both a community and you're settling that with a contract. And the contract is to the community, but also on the very deed that you're supplied with, there is also information about the covenant. And 30 odd years ago, when I first moved in, I was alerted to this fact by the previous owner of my property. And when it came time for us to do our renovation, we went through a process where we applied to council for a development application or a building application. We spoke with council about what we planned to build. We opened it up to our neighbours to comment on that. And if they had objections, then we compromised on issues to make sure that we built within the rules. Sadly, this is no longer the case. And despite the fact that that covenant, that contract that you entered into in purchasing the property is still valid, the problem is that that contract is not being upheld. And people are either choosing not to do it or are unaware, but as we know, ignorance is no excuse for breaking the law. We look around the streets of Rosebery at the moment and we can see multiple developments that are in breach of the covenant. And the problem has arisen because that process where we went through our building and development application is no longer there. the majority of the houses that are being built, contrary to the covenant, are being built under a system that was developed by the state government and our current planning minister, who's probably never been to Rosebery, but each time we make we complain about what's going on here, we're told that it's not a priority. The problem is that as this continues, the nature of our suburb will continue to be eroded. And by the time we finally do get some action, they'll say, well, I know what you're barking about. There's hundreds of houses in the area that are already double-storey. So we need to get in early to make sure that we can stop this process and that we can enforce the regulations as they are provided as part of the covenant. There's been a number of houses in the immediate vicinity of my house where we've received notes from certifiers to indicate that a development is taking place. And where before those development applications that went to council were multi-page events, you now get a single line of text saying a development is being planned for such and such a residence, and if you've got any complaints, send us an email. You never get to see what's actually being built. Until there's a slab in the ground and the framework goes up, it's probably then too late to complain, because you'd need to contest that in fair trade or land environment, and again it becomes an incredibly imposition on the people that are being wronged. If you try to contact the certifier, you generally get a very scant response, if at all, and they consistently push the responsibility onto the owner or onto the builder, but ultimately they're the ones who've signed off and ticked the boxes for these structures to be built. And even when they're finished and you get to see what's been built, they aren't responsible for the fact that the rules have been broken. Well, that's what they tell us. And, they weren't aware of the covenant and its conditions. I suppose what we are here to do is to encourage everyone to make a stand, to let others know when these structures are going up so that we can use the power of numbers perhaps to get some more information. But ultimately what we'd like to see is our council handed back the responsibility for developing their own territory and for it not to be held by the state government. If that's the case, if they're going to take over that portion of the council's responsibility, what other portions are they hoping to also overtake? We need a local council for a local community, and we're hoping that, again, we can prevent further houses being built in the region that don't qualify to the covenant. And for those of you who haven't ever read the covenant that's written on your deed, it says single-storey house, double frontage, tile roof, and that's it. So that's what we're fighting for, and I hope you're all in agreement that we need to continue the fight.
Thank you, John. A few more people have come along there, and Vanessa's out there somewhere. Vanessa's over here now, so if you haven't given Vanessa her phone number, she's not going to stalk you with it. What she's going to do is, if we have any issues, we'll make sure everyone gets contacted. I'm going to hand over to the Lord Mayor to give us a bit of an update. Yeah, on we sent some questions through yesterday, and so it's going to be part of a bit of a response here. And then if there's an opportunity, we'll get 3 or 4 questions after we hear from Linda.
Thanks very much, Wayne. And hello, everyone. And it's nice to see you here on a sunny morning in spring. So I'm very pleased to be here. I'm also here with Linda Scott and Philip Dallas, who are councillors of the city, and I brought along 2 of our our planning experts, Ben Peachy and Andrew Thomas. And I'd first of all acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and acknowledge the people of the many nations who live in our city. And first of all, to what John was saying about private certification and control being taken out of council's hands through private certification, that came to the New South Wales Parliament when the Labor Party was in government, and there were two people that opposed that private certification legislation in the New South Wales Parliament, and it was me and Peter McDonald. Everyone else in the Parliament voted for it. And I agree absolutely with what John said about local councils being responsible for local communities' development. That's why we have a private certification system, and that's why we have so many problems that we have. So to come to your special issue. So James and Wayne came and addressed us at Council on the 20th of July on your behalf to talk about the proposed this state government's new low-rise housing diversity code and the impact on your special character area. So this is another way of legitimate planning being taken out of the control of Council's hands. What this means, and what Rob Stokes is now trying to do, is to get development happening right across the metropolitan area without having to go through the processes that normal development applications have to go through. So we are very much opposed to this, and I've had a meeting with the Minister about that to oppose it and to speak about the special character of your area. And he said to me this was not aimed at the city, this was aimed at the rest of the metropolitan area. So if we can just sort of put that to one side. So I just also want to I put this in a letter to you. Did you all get the letter this week? Good, okay. I'd just like to refer to the letter, which is probably the quickest way of talking about it with you. The Rosebery Estate has a unique character that's been forged and protected over time, initially through a covenant imposed by the original owners, and then by carefully crafted local planning controls that deliver housing diversity while maintaining character. So we had quite a comprehensive consultation with you in 2012 before that control was adopted, and the main aim of it was to ensure that this special character of your neighbourhood, this suburban bungalow streetscape that is so characteristic of this area, would be protected, but people who needed to increase their household or wanting to increase to do renovations would have to do it whilst at the same time preserving the front of the house to maintain the suburban bungalow character of your area. So that was a control that was introduced in 2012. So just going back to the letter, the covenant restricts development to single-storey dwellings and describes setbacks and materials. Such covenants, common in the early 20th century subdivisions, were a precursor. They were a precursor to planning controls, and they established a shared value for the character of the neighbourhood. So by having that covenant in place for all of that time, and I don't know if any of you remember David Kroll, he was an alderman on South Sydney Council, and that was his only speech. He represented Rosebery, and the only thing he ever talked about for those years I was on council with him was the covenant. So I know about your covenant well and truly. The controls we developed in 2012 when we were doing our local environmental plan were about protecting what the covenant protected, but the covenant was the precursor to controls. We now have controls in place, and they're aimed at protecting the single-storey streetscape, and development, two-storey development would have to be at the back of the single-storey house. And this is what I said in the meeting to Rob Stokes, and I've subsequently written to him, and I don't have the reply, but he probably just has so much on his plate. He gave me an oral agreement that the city would not be impacted. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that, and that you understood the work we did with you in 2012, and it was about giving, I guess, a 21st century interpretation of the covenant. It's about protecting the special suburban bungalow character of your streetscape, whilst at the same time allowing those people that need to increase their footprint because of family issues or needs to renovate, have to do it at the back of the house. Now, I'm really concerned about the two houses that Wayne talked about in his letter to me. So I have brought along Ben Peachy from our planning department to talk about that. And then I'm going to ask Andrew Thomas to talk about compliance so that you all understand what the situation is, and then that will help you compile your questions. So Ben, could you just come and talk about the controls, the 2012 controls, and what they mean, and what are people allowed to do here, and if possible, about those two houses?
So back in, it actually started around 2007, and Council did a couple of studies for the area to look at whether it should be heritage listed, and the results of those studies were put to Council and also out to consultation with the community, and what they found was that there wasn't enough original fabric left to actually make it a heritage area and conserve it in that way. And that also wasn't supported by the community at the time. So what Council resolved to do was to make it a special character area. And so we map Rosebery in our local environmental plan, which is the highest level of planning controls that the Council has. And it says that Rosebery is a special character area. And then in our other set of planning rules, we say that you need to keep the front of the house, and you can add behind it, as the Lord Mayor was saying, but that's actually within a roof form. So it's not a full second story on the back, it's within a roof form. So we still allow that change to happen, but it's in a way that's sympathetic and responsive to the character of Rosebery. And we knew we had to do that because in 2009, the state government came in and put in place their statewide rules, which override Council's rules and say you can just build a two-storey house through private certification. So you don't even need to come to Council for that approval. So we knew we needed to provide an appropriate alternative, and that's what our rules do. And we know that some people have gone through that process and taken up that alternative. And we think that's a good outcome where they do that, and it provides it retains the character of the area, but also allows people to update their homes, make them fit for purpose when they've got expanding families and the like. We continue to push the New South Wales government to remove Rosebery from the application of those statewide rules. We've written to multiple ministers multiple times and provided those studies that said, while it's not a heritage area, there are very special characteristics about this place, and we recognise that in our planning rules. And most recently, the Lord Mayor spoke about her meeting with the Minister, and we've also written, I think it was in March this year and in May, and we wrote again to the Department of Planning after a recent Council meeting, providing the advice that James provided to the Council. We have since had a more recent meeting in the last couple of weeks with some senior people at the Department of Planning, and they understand the issue. They now understand the issue that we've been pressing for so long, and the problem with the covenant and some of the complying development outcomes that we see. So we hope we've got a bit of traction there to get some changes and hopefully carve Rosebery out of the those statewide planning rules.
Thank you, Ben. Just a quick comment on the compliance side. So what is the legal route, I suppose, if someone, such as a private certifier, doesn't do their job properly. So essentially, the role of a private certifier is to ensure that any building that is under their control meets the required standards. So primarily, for them, what they're looking at is the statewide control, the statewide code that overrides council's controls. They also have an obligation to observe any private covenant that applies to that land. The issue here is that they are not having any regard to the covenant and just looking at the state code. So that is a key concern of council. We have written to the Department of Fair Trading, which oversees the conduct of private certifiers, and given them all the details of the certifiers, the addresses and the documentation that applies to those buildings where we see that they've disregarded the private covenant that applies to that land. Now, we will wait to see what they can do. There are various sanctions that can be put on private certifiers, whether they're fined, their licence to operate might be suspended, or they're reprimanded. So there's a place on the web page of Fair Trading that shows what private certifiers have done and where they've been taken to the tribunal. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to say about the compliance side.
We're going to hear from Linda Scott, President of Local Government New South Wales, and then we'll take some questions.
Thanks, Wayne, so very much. I'd also like to start by acknowledging that we meet today on the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And it's lovely to be here with the Lord Mayor and also Councillor Salas. It's hot. We've had lots of speeches, so I'm going to be very, very brief. As the President of the Local Government Association, we have been arguing with the Liberal State Government about this for years. The previous Planning Minister, Anthony Roberts, introduced a code in April 2018. That code overrode the city's planning controls. It essentially argued that in places like Rosebery and in council areas across the state, the council's planning controls could be overridden and their code would apply. This is the source of the problem. So it means that instead of looking at our planning controls, instead of looking at the covenant, what certifiers and what other approvals are looking at is this new code. We know, and we fought to get more than 50 exemptions for council areas who didn't want this code to apply, including for the City of Sydney. We successfully won an exemption for 2 years for the City of Sydney. But the Minister, Rob Stokes, in this current state government has come and said no. From now on, from the middle of this year, this new code will apply. What does this mean for Rosebery? Rosebery is one of the most affected areas in the City of Sydney, and it means, as everybody has already said, for so long, the covenants and other planning controls that have protected your beautiful Californian bungalows, the reason why so many of you love living here, it can be overridden by a code that allows for bigger, denser, poor quality development. It does not come to the council, it's ticked off by a certifier, and until recently there was no licensing for certifiers. You could do a short course and say you're a certifier, and if you did something wrong, you couldn't be struck off. We wouldn't let our doctors be like that, would we? We wouldn't let our nurses be like that. We wouldn't let so many other professionals behave in that way. So what can we do? We all together have to lobby the state government to give Rosebery an exemption from this code. We do not want this code to apply in Rosebery. We've been fighting about this already. We've done media about it. Thanks to the many of you who I know have done media with me about this issue. We've written to the Minister. I've spoken to the Minister about it. Others have as well. But the source of this problem is the state government's code that overrides not just the planning controls in Rosebery, the planning controls all over the state to fast-track poor quality development. And so we have to say no. So it's great you've been working on petitions. It's great you've been rallying with your neighbours. But we have to keep going because recently Rob Stokes, the New South Wales Liberal Planning Minister, wrote back to us and he said no. I will not exempt Rosebery. Rosebery is staying in the code. So we have to keep fighting this until he changes his mind. I know the Premier's busy, she's got a lot of things to worry about. We need the Planning Minister to step in, to take back the code from Rosebery and to allow the Council's planning controls to apply and to allow your covenants to be upheld. Thank you for being here today. We've got a long way to go, but we are not going to stop until we win this fight. Thank you.
Bravo, bravo. Thanks, Linda. So we did put a couple of questions down on the paper, and the guys have assisted in answering some of those, so that's terrific. Yep. So what we want to know is, who do we contact and who do we ring up and talk to when we see something that's going on that doesn't meet what we believe are the rules? Because at the moment they're skirting around those, so that's probably something that's still outstanding from our questions. Who should we contact?
I'll get Andrew Thomas to talk about that, but planning is very confusing, and it's confusing because it's been taken out of Council's control. So the Minister has told me that this code will not apply to Rosebery. He has not written that response yet, but he gave that commitment in a meeting. So that's one issue. The other issue is about private certification. And that whilst we might have a former Liberal Minister introducing a code in 2018, he was able to do that. He was really only extending what the Labor Party had done in 1997, which was about private certification. It really has concerned me over the many years I've been an elected representative how the major parties want to play around with planning and development and make it easier for developers and make it harder for communities. So that's what we're dealing with here. But I'll get Andrew to talk to you about who to go to about compliance. But in terms of this recent code that I have been talking about, that Rob Stokes introduced for across the metropolitan area, he has told me, he's spoken to me about it and said it was never planned for the city, he doesn't intend extending it to the city. And so as soon as I hear from him, I will write to you and tell you that. I have met with him, it's been discussed at Council, I've since written to him, and I'll come back to you when I have a response. And I'll put you under Andrew Thomas to tell you about who you can contact in terms of this compliance that is happening because of a private certification system introduced in the 90s, which was so wrong. And as I said, I voted against that, and so did the other independent in Parliament at the time, Peter MacDonald. The major parties supported it. And that's what's so wrong with this system.
Just before Andrew, if you want to ask a question, come on down to a bit to the side here. I said 3 on our agenda, we're going to extend it to 5 before Andrew answers back, and it's pleasing to see that a number of those developments have been referred to fair trading. So Andrew's going to answer the question on who should we call, and it's not Ghostbusters.
So we have an area manager that looks after compliance in this area. His name is Damien Zammit. He has overseen the letter that's gone to fair trading. We can certainly pass on his details, through Wayne to everyone, or through the Lord Mayor's office. Essentially, that would be the first stop. You are also able to contact fair trading yourselves, but I understand that it's a little bit unwieldy. It's something that my staff are much more used to doing, and we're quite prepared to do that on your behalf.
Hi, I'm Bruce Fulton, and I live in Rothschild Avenue. As we all know, there's a number of these complying developments that have happened in Rosebery, okay, and a number of people have been wronged. And we've heard this morning that these developments are in breach of the law. So my question is to whoever cares to answer it, what are our remedies?
So, as I said, the covenant is a private legal instrument that gives you certain rights over other people's lands, right? So it's not a law, it's not a regulation, it is a right that you have if you own a property that describes how you share an interest with your community. that goes to how houses are designed. By and large, those covenants were overridden by New South Wales planning law, and that's essentially happened. That happens through the introduction of local environment plans. They're the rules, the state rules that apply to your land. So, if you have a private interest that's crafted in a covenant, then it's up to you to enforce that. Council's role here is we have the private certifiers. They also have an obligation to observe that covenant, on behalf of the landowner. So they're effectively approving houses and alterations that are not consistent with the covenant. They're only looking at the state code, which prescribes a set of rules that apply just about everywhere else in New South Wales. So it's a very generic statewide code that probably works well in areas where new houses are being built in brand new areas, in what we call greenfield areas. They don't work very well in existing communities where there's an existing character.
Good morning, everybody. This is more like a statement. Yeah? Okay, this is it. I've lived here since 1960, so enjoyed this park and the general environment here, the community that changed over the years. But I mean, the statement is, I'm an architect, by the way, so with over 40 years experience. Recently retired, and to see this, it's like a lightning bolt of what's happening here. It's for the community. It's really destroying the character of Rosebery, the parks, the gardens, Daceyville. My company was originally responsible for the Daceyville plan. So, social housing, new ideas from Europe, back in the early part of the century, last century. So it is like a lightning bolt because, all the properties here in Rosebery had a covenant. The covenant was set by, I researched it, by the times of Lord Rosebery. And it dated back 100 years. So what I had to do when we wanted to extend our house, and it's across there, just in Hayes Road, with the covenant, you couldn't go above the ridge line of the building. And that was set. And you had to have brick. You had to have, if you paint some areas, no timber, tiled roofs. So these were the specifications of the properties, and those planning rules lasted for over 100 years. And then 2007, you had the heritage thing removed. It didn't remove the streetscape quality. Planning is planning. Planning controls are sit in the LEP, and they're to be adhered to. You just don't change them. And the other interesting thing, which nobody's brought up, and I attended a couple of community meetings, is that you can't change a covenant without getting every resident to agree to the change. Now, if you quote me on that, I'm not a legal person, but that was it. So something's happened in the system. And all the other changes of private certifiers and all these other things that have happened, changes in the system. So, the people, community got aware of it. Now, I'm not here to lecture. What I'm saying is the changes have come on board, and it's really been a detriment to the community. The community is suffering. The values of the property will suffer. So, this density, you want to increase the density, but it's all been increased everywhere else. Planning laws allow for increase in density, and then jobs that follow, sociological issues have to be addressed, all the community services have to be addressed. It's a very, very organised process. Now, I don't want to carry on, but the point is the covenant. So you can always go back to the covenant, and the private certifiers and all that can be changed. Thank you.
A bit like South Sydney, here to stay. Got it, Steve? Got a question? So essentially what... Bruce? I thought we'd referred to fair trading. No. Yes.
So, like, as I said, the private covenant is a instrument that's in a landowner's favour. As various local environment plans have come into being since the 90s, because of the covenant relying on private property owners to enforce and protect the covenant, planning controls have come in place that largely take over the role of what the covenant did, which was to preserve character, set rules like tiles, bricks, setbacks, and yes, well, the planning controls, which were put in place by council, have been overridden by a generic statewide code that says you can build a two-storey house in a residential zone anywhere you like in New South Wales. You don't? Correct. Correct. So, as I was saying, the statewide code overrides council's planning controls. You're absolutely right. The private covenant is still in place. It still exists. Yeah? That's right. And, well, it's the state government who oversees the behaviour and actions, provides the rights for private certifiers to operate. Yep. Yep. Sure. So the primary responsibility for administering the conduct of certifiers is the state government. Now, council staff are quite happy to have these things brought to our attention. We're aware of 6. We've written to Fair Trading to say we're concerned about the conduct of these private certifiers on these particular properties and referred them to the specific complying development certificates. Then the State Department of Fair Trading has a number of things that they can do. They can issue a reprimand, they can fine. Well, we can continue to make representations on your behalf to Fair Trading. We've written once, you know, so that's what we've done so far.
Yep, so in general, we hear your frustration, but Amy's trying to answer. What we can do, we're going to keep lobbying, we're going to keep going through. This gentleman here wants to have a say, all right? So we can contact Damien, we can contact Fair Trading, we can all do our bit. Okay, so it's been pretty clearly answered. Now I know that, I understand that. That's our frustration. That's why we're here meeting in the park today. But we'll keep our eyes and ears open. We'll nominate it. We've got a contact number for Damien to tell him when we see something that's untowards. They've referred for the first time these things to Fair Trading. We've made a start. Congratulations, everybody.
Thank you. My name's Aristotle, and I've been a resident for almost 45 years. Now, my question is this. We've been focusing on certifiers. So with certifiers, there's something that's going to happen to them. But the point is this. If people in this suburb have applied to refurbish their home in accordance with the established local planning framework, i.e. outside the code, so they've come through council to get approval. And it is very clear that the planning framework has not been followed. Why can't the council take action against the owners? See, you're focusing on... You haven't answered that question. You've skirted around it. Why can't you go to the owner and say, you have not followed in accordance with the framework, the established framework? That's number one. And number two, I know that the covenant requires people in their own private capacity to sue the person who hasn't followed the covenant. But why can't you bring a class action on our behalf? Surely there's sufficient community interest there to bring a class action.
So in relation to your first question, now I'm assuming that when you say that someone has built a house that doesn't comply with the local environmental planning, you know, so, yeah, if they haven't complied with that, and now I'm making an assumption here that they've got some approval through a complying development certificate, then, you know, the council's planning controls don't apply. So there's nothing we can do, right? So if someone builds something without permission, or they vary from the their approved plan, yep, council can. Well, we're not aware. We're not aware. So, well, that's. Well, you know, we've been engaging with the Rosebery community. I know since at least 2012. Well. Yeah, so if there is illegal building work or something that doesn't comply, by all means, come to council, report it to council, and we'll do something about it. Now, you know, I'm not aware of illegal building work in Rosebery. So,
Linda, did you want to say something before we go to another question? And that's what we did really want, pitting residents against residents, all right? So let's keep it respectful. They are on the case. And I've been fighting harder than anybody else, all right? We've got a list, we'll build on that list.
So I just wanted to add that it's definitely the case that many of you have spoken to me and my office about concerns about particular dwellings that have been built that are not in accordance with the planning board. So I've definitely heard that message. We have lobbied very hard to get a building commissioner in New South Wales to start the enforcement of some of these activities. Again, not just a problem for the City of Sydney, a problem across the state. I personally have reported the instances where certifiers have certified buildings where residents have let me know that there has been a problem to the building commissioner. I spoke to him personally yesterday to follow this up and make it clear that we need enforcement action to happen. So this is going to be a long and difficult journey, but as an elected councillor, I'm doing all I can. I'm literally passing on your personal reports. I'm liaising with the building commissioner to ensure that where there are grounds, enforcement can be taken.
Councillor Tallis, and then we'll go to a couple of questions here and we'll wrap it up.
Okay, hello everybody. I think that if you want to talk to somebody, the key person for you to talk to is the planning minister. The Lord Mayor has been to see the planning minister. She's put your case very forcefully. He's open to it. What the Lord Mayor really needs is everybody who's in this park. I just shout. Everybody who's in this park to write the Rob Stokes, the planning minister, and say Rosebery is different. Rosebery is special. Your rules, which apply across New South Wales, should not be applied to Rosebery. That's what we need as backup from all of you. That's why you've come here and you feel so strongly about it. We've heard that loud and clear. But you need to help us take political action. Now, as the Lord Mayor has said, this problem started with private certification and has been ramped up by this government, which has extended private certification. Now, wearing my other hat, I'm actually an architect. I see how bad private certification is every day of the week in my day job. The problem is that private suppliers are only there to interpret the National Construction Code. They've got no expertise in design or planning, okay? And so what the city's code is a merit-based code, and that is overridden by the state one-size-fits-all exempt and complying development. That's the key point. And so the covenant is a private thing that you have, the SEPP is a public thing we have, and then above that, there's the state government can simply override that. That's what we need to change now.
Some water in that bag there. Steve, 2 more questions, but again, there's some things we could do, all right?
Hi everybody, my name is Steve. First of all, I'd like to give a round of congratulations to Wayne over here for organising this. There would be no way that we would know anything about this until he had his Zoom meeting, which Linda was on, and I've organised for Clover Moore to be here. I respect that, and thank you for coming down. Please don't forget this area, Rosebery. You have got a lot of people that will vote for you if you stand up for us. Now, leave politics behind. I'll give you an example of what's happened. This is my 82-year-old mother. Okay?
So he's got photos here where the private certifiers have just gone through.
This was back in September 2015. I was at a wedding. My mum was doing her garden.
No windows in the property, and then they put windows in, overlooking into the backyard, into the bathroom.
I've written to the council and I've written to Linda. I've yet to receive from 2015 an email back from anyone in the council. All I had was Angela Vathakis come speak to my mum because she's from a Greek background. Now, the other thing is, there's a lot of people here, and I'm speaking for a lot of the elderly residents that are cooped up in their homes, don't know anything about what's going on. All these developments happening. If it wasn't for Wayne over here, we wouldn't know anything. So what I would like to put to you, Clover, this is what needs to change with private certifiers. They need to get signatures before they start from the residents to actually build. This will solve a lot of issues. Hear me now. Let's put into place for anyone who wants to build, they put it back on the owner. Make sure that you have a letter designed from the council where they need to sign, I don't know, give it a whole block, 50 signatures to actually go ahead with the proposal. But at the moment, these private certifiers are out of control, and you will agree with me there. Okay? We're just over it. Now, the other thing is, a lot of these elderly people and other people from non-speaking backgrounds don't know where to go to. So you've got to help them. I'm talking here because there's a lot of elderly residents and people from non-speaking backgrounds. Now, in regards to the covenant as well, I'll tell you what's going on. When my parents purchased a house over in Rosebery, they had a covenant on the title deeds. Now, these guys that are building, go back to their title deeds. As council, you've got every right to go back, do the search for the title deeds. If it's got a covenant, that's their problem. They've got to go put it back the way it was. Isn't that right? Thank you, ma'am, over there. Because, yeah. 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 What's going on, Clover? That needs to be addressed. So with this covenant, we need something done urgently. So hear us now. Thank you, Wayne.
And we better take that one on notice as well. This gentleman's been waiting patiently.
Thanks very much. Mike Burns here, just up the road here. Lord Mayor, thank you very much for coming. Look, it sounds like on balance here, the only way forward is via Rob Stokes, which you've actually discussed about. And I'm just wondering, do you need to have a coordinated approach to deal with that situation? Because without that, it sounds like there's a lot of talk going on and no action. But I think that we can concentrate our direction to Rob Stokes. That will give us the results we need. Thank you.
Terrific, and we'll work with council to get that going along, and some action has taken place at a certain number of these places to the fair trading, which is a great start. Anything final? Everyone okay? And well, look, thanks for coming down and on a Saturday, and thanks very much to your staff too, coming down and assisting us, and we look forward to continuing to work together to try and get the result we need. So thanks again.
Thank you everyone for coming, and I'm sure it's very confusing, and I just want to make it quite clear that the covenant is your responsibility as a private owner. The controls that the council put in place in 2012 took over from the covenant in terms of protecting your area, and that's what I'm wanting Rob Stokes to respect, that those controls, which are about doing the same thing that the covenant previously did, that is respecting the bungalow appearance of your homes to the streetscape. And so I will go back again to Rob Stokes. I will even invite him here to meet you. But in terms of the private certifiers, that is, as others have said, in the hands of the state government. And so that's what the problem is. But if you contact my office, we will respond on your behalf. But I think the most effective thing, and Wayne has all your addresses, I will prepare a petition to him, give it to Wayne. You can get one who signed here to another one. Yes, you keep doing. Look, the one thing I've learned about public life is you determine and you keep doing it to get the outcome. And clearly you're very concerned about what's happening, and so we have to get the outcome. We need to get Rob Stokes to agree to an exemption to his code for Metropolitan Sydney for this area, and we need to get reform in terms of private certification.
Thank you very much, and we'll wrap it up there. Again, thanks everyone. Your interest has given us more inspiration. I was thinking there'd be going to be James, Jim, and John and a few others, and about 15 people, but it's terrific to see everybody getting behind it, and it gives us more inspiration to fight on, and we'll keep you informed the best way we can. There's an email link chain, and we'll do the letterbox, and we'll have a bit of a coordinated approach now with council to see if the minister would like to come to a sunny day. When's the next election? Well, we've got a little bit of time, 2020. No, we know when the local government is, but we need a state government one as well. All right, thanks everybody, keep safe. We've really enjoyed the day, and have a great afternoon.